let me continue on to get to the point.
All right.
Now the argument that you want to raise is about the Gentiles, right? Who were the Gentiles? The Gentiles were Israelites that had adopted Greek customs, Greek codes, and Greek languages. They thought themselves to be Greeks. That's who the Gentiles were, but their lineage on their father's side went back to Israelites. But they took the physical appearance of the Greeks. They kept the Greek, they wore the Greek togas and everything. They did everything the Greeks did, but their spirit was of Israel.
That's right.
Why did Paul go to Rome and to the Caesar and witness to him, saying that the Christ, the Messiah, has come? Why is he witnessing to a non-Jew?
Because you thought he was a Greek. Well, no, he was just really explaining. Just because
the Christ, the Messiah, has come. Why is he witnessing to a non-Greek?
Did everything the Greeks did, but their spirit was of Israel.
That's right.
Why did Paul go to Rome and to the Caesar and witness to him, saying that?
All right, I'd like to start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is, Why Did Paul Appeal to Caesar? Pretty much what happened is I was watching this video, the brothers from Atlanta, this Edomite from Georgia Tech College came up and was asking them questions about the scriptures. And, you know, brothers was explaining the Israelite foreigner thing about the Gentiles. And then he jumped up and said, why did Paul go to the Caesar and witness him about the Messiah, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. Well, there was a reason why he did that, you know, and the short of it is that he was being persecuted by the Jews for teaching what he was teaching. And they were saying that, you know, he was speaking against the laws and the customs of Jerusalem, which he wasn't. So they wanted to kill him. So he had to go to Caesar. And when he went before Caesar, because he understood the Roman law, because he was a Roman citizen, what he was doing is he was appealing and he was going through the process of defending himself against the accusations, because they just wanted to straight up kill him. And that's a short skinny of it. That's the reason why he was in Rome witnessing to them. And eventually he had to go and teach the Israelites that were in those areas anyway. And that's a short skinny of it. So what we're going to do is just going to go through some of the history on that to kind of get an idea of what he wasn't witnessing to Pontius Salaki. He wasn't witnessing to Felix and Festus and all them individuals, Agrippa, about becoming Israelites and converting to the truth. You know, he was pretty much defending himself for what was being brought, or the charges that were being brought against him. That was the main thing. So he had to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. So when we go to Acts 21, this is where they pretty much grabbed him up and they were beating him. This is Acts 21:4. And finding disciples, we tarried there 7 days, who said to Paul through the Spirit that he should not go up to Jerusalem. Why? Because if he would have went to Jerusalem, the Jews, the leaders, were going to grab him up. Right? Jumping down to the 10th verse. And you brothers could read the whole chapter. And as we tarried there many days, there came down from Judea a certain prophet named Agabus. And when he was come unto us, he took Paul's girdle and bound his own hands and feet and said, Thus saith the Holy Spirit, so shall the Jews at Jerusalem bind the man that owneth this girdle, and shall deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles and to these nations, to the Caesars and them. And when he had heard these things, when we heard these things, both we and they of that place besought him not to go up to Jerusalem. So they didn't want the Apostle Paul to go to Jerusalem, because they didn't want him to suffer this thing. Then Paul answered, What mean ye to weep and to break mine heart? For I am ready not to be bound only, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Yahushai. So he was already resolved. He already kept it within himself that he was ready to die for Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai. And when he would not be persuaded, we cease saying, the will of the Lord be done, because at the end of the day, this was the will of the Lord. And after those days, we took up our carriages and went up to Jerusalem. So they finally got to Jerusalem from these places here, Rhodes, Coos, and Rhodes, and Patara, Phoenicia. So in these areas here, Syria, Tyre. So when he finished visiting these places, he was on his way to Jerusalem. Verse 21. And they are informed of thee, that thou teachest at all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses. And that's not what he was saying. He was saying that the Messiah is the one that takes precedence. You still keep the law to the best of your ability, but the Messiah is the one that's going to deliver you. Yahweh Shai is the one that's going to deliver you. You can't keep the law perfectly. It says, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither to walk after the customs. What is it, therefore? The multitude must needs come together, for they will hear that thou art come. So you brothers, when you get a chance, go back and read the whole story so you can get acquainted with everything that was going on. Do therefore this that we say to thee, we have 4 men which have a vow on them. So on and so he went, he had a vow of the Nazarite on him. He shaved his head, shaved his beard, shaved his hair, their hairs, just to prove to them that he wasn't breaking the laws or the customs of the scriptures. Jumping to 27. And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were of Asia, when they saw him in the temple, stirred up all the people and laid hands on him. So they saw him, they knew what he had done, they knew that he was preaching in the name of Yahweh Shai, so they grabbed him up to beat him. They were trying to kill him, crying out, Men of Israel, help! This is the man that teacheth all men everywhere against the people and the law and this place, and further brought Greeks also into the temple, and hath polluted this holy place. For they had seen before with him in the city Trophimus, an Ephesian, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. And all the city was moved, and the people ran together, and they took Paul, and drew him out of the temple, and forthwith the doors were shut. It says, and as they went about to kill him, see, they were trying to kill him, tidings came unto the chief captain of the band, that all Jerusalem was in an uproar, who immediately took soldiers and centurions, and ran down unto them. And when they saw the chief captain, so when the Israelites saw the chief captain and the soldiers, they left beating of Paul. So they stopped beating Paul. All right. It says, then the chief captain came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains, and demanded who he was and what he had done. So they beat him. Then they came, the chief captain and the soldiers grabbed him and pretty much locked him up. And some cried one, and then they're asking him, what's going on? What did this man do? And some cried one thing, some another among the multitude. And when he could not know the certainty for the tumult, he commanded him to be carried into the castle. And when he came upon the stairs, so it was that he was born of the soldiers for the violence of the people, because he was pretty much woozy from the beating that he caught. So the soldiers had to pretty much hold him up. For the multitude of the people followed after, crying, away with him. So you still had the Israelites following him. So they were bringing charges against him, and he was being brought into the prison. Jumping down to, now let's go to the 22nd chapter and the 22nd verse. So he spoke to them in the Hebrew language, and all of that. And this is the conclusion that they came to after he finished speaking. And they gave him audience unto this word, and then lifted up their voices and said, away with such a fellow from the earth, for it is not fit that he should live. So pretty much they were the ones that gave him over to the Romans. And this is why he was in the presence and in the prison, and eventually started pretty much his defense to Festus or Felix and to Agrippa, because of this situation that was taking place. And this is why the Apostle Paul was there. And as they cried out and cast off their clothes and threw dust into the air, the chief captain commanded him to be brought into the castle, and bade that he should be examined by scourging, that he might know wherefore they cried so against him. Jumping down to the 30th verse. On the morrow, because he would have known the certainty wherefore he was accused of the Jews, see, he loosed him from his bands, and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear and brought Paul down and set him before them. Now let's go to the 23rd chapter, the 10th verse. Then he went and then he was before the council of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and seeing that it was going against him, he said he was a Pharisee, and that caused a division among the Pharisees and the Sadducees, right? So going on, and like I said, you could read the 21st, 22nd chapter, 23rd, all the way to the end. And when there arose a great dissension, the chief captain, fearing lest Paul should have been pulled in pieces of them, once again, they were trying to beat him again, commanded the soldiers to go down and to take him by force from among them and to bring him into the castle. Now jumping down to the 23rd verse, and he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, now in the midst of all of that, what happened was you had the Jews, that took a vow, about a little more than 40 of them took a vow to kill Paul. They weren't going to eat until they killed Paul. So they said, look, we're going to have the captain bring Paul back for another re-examination. But what we're really going to do is we're going to kill him. And we're not going to eat until we kill him. So this is what was going on. And so Paul's, I believe it's Paul's sister's son it was, if I'm not mistaken, heard of the plot, told the captain of the guard, and the captain of the guard set up men to take Paul away from there. So, and he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 70, and spearmen 200 at the 3rd hour of the night, and provide them beasts that they may set Paul on, and bring him safe unto Felix the governor. See, because remember, the Romans were the ones that were in power. So Paul was at the mercy of them. That was the court system back then. Verse 27. This man was taken of the Jews and should have been killed of them. Then came I with an army and rescued him, having understood that he was a Roman. Because he uses Roman status in order to be able to be delivered from those situations. And when I would have known the cause wherefore they accused him, I brought him forth into their council. See, so he was among the council of the Pharisees and Sadducees. It says, whom I perceived to be accused of questions of their law, but to have nothing laid to his charge worthy of death or of bonds. See, so there was nothing that they found worthy of him being put to death. So because the Jews had to get the permission from the Romans before they could kill anybody, but they couldn't. When he was examined, they didn't find anything in Paul worthy of death. And when it was told me how that the Jews laid wait for the man, I sent straightway to thee and gave commandment to his accusers also to say before thee what they had against him. Farewell. So this was an actual letter that was written to Festus, or Felix, was it? It was either Festus or Felix. Like I said, you brothers could read the rest. Now we jump into the 25th verse and the 25th verse and the 25th chapter and the 6th verse. And when he had tarried among them more than 10 days, this is Felix, he went down unto Caesarea, and the next day sitting on the judgment seat commanded Paul to be brought. So the apostle Paul was being brought before these governors and all that, these heathen governors, because Jake was accusing them. You see, he wasn't going to them to witness to them and to teach them and, to break down the gospel to them so that they can, be delivered or saved. And when he was come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood round about and laid many and grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. While he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor yet against Caesar have I offended anything at all. But Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, see, so now this devil here, Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, because he got money from them, answered Paul and said, wilt thou go up to Jerusalem and there be judge of these things before me? See, so now he wants to send them back to Jerusalem to be judge of these charges by him. And this is why the apostle Paul said, oh, hell no, because he knew that they wanted to kill him, the Jews. Then said Paul, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews have I done no wrong, as thou very well knowest. For if I be an offender or have committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. But if there be none of these things whereof they accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. I appeal to Caesar. This is why he appealed to Caesar. And when he appeared before Caesar, what do you think he has to give his defense? So he started breaking down the reason why he was there from the beginning. How Yahushua appeared to him, how he was persecuting them. He was persecuting the church, and then the Lord came to him, and then he turned his ways around, and he started teaching the same doctrine that he was fighting against, and how he was, accused by his brethren and this, that, and the other. So he was given a defense. He wasn't preaching the gospel to them. All right, so now you can read the rest, like I said. Jump to the 28th chapter and the 17th verse. And it came to pass that after 3 days, Paul called the chief of the Jews together. He's going back and explaining what happened. And when they were come together, he said unto them, Men and brethren, though I have committed nothing against the people or customs of our fathers, yet was I delivered prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of the Romans. And this is why he was in the presence of these different Romans, and there was nothing left for him to do but appeal to Caesar, because he was a Roman citizen and he knew the Roman law. So he used the Roman law to his benefit. Otherwise they would have killed him. Who, when they had examined me, because we just told you he went through the council, they examined him, they beat him and all of that. I'm sorry, not the council. This was dealing with the Romans. When the Romans examined him, they did beat him, and they examined him, would have let me go because there was no cause of death in me. But when the Jews spake against it, I was constrained to appeal unto Caesar. And this is why the Apostle Paul was in front of Caesar. This is why the Apostle Paul had to speak to Festus and Felix and Agrippa and all them. And then he was sent on his way to Caesar. Why? Because he was being accused. And they wanted blood. So he didn't go before the Romans to witness to them about Yahushua. He didn't go just of his own accord. He went because he was accused. And because the Lord delivered him from that situation by these different appeals. So it says, For this cause, therefore, have I called for you, to see you, and to speak with you, because that for the hope of Israel I am bound with this chain. So this is why the Apostle Paul was before these different Roman rulers. And one of them was an Edomite. Well, they were all Edomites, but one of them knew he was an Edomite. The other ones were Romans, which were Edomites also. All right? So this is the reason why the Apostle Paul was so-called witnessing to Caesar. He wasn't witnessing to him. He was actually giving a defense for himself.
The argument that you want to raise is about the Gentiles, right? Who were the Gentiles? The Gentiles were Israelites that had adopted Greek customs, Greek cultures, and Greek languages. They thought themselves to be Greeks. That's who the Gentiles were, but their lineage on their father's side went back to Israelites. But they took the physical appearance of the Greeks. They kept the Greek, they wore the Greek togas and everything. They did everything the Greeks did, but their spirit was of Israel.
That's right.
Why did Paul go to Rome and to the Caesar and witness to him, saying that the Christ, the Messiah, has come? Why is he witnessing to a non-Jew?
Because he thought he was a Greek. Well, no, he was just really explaining. Just because I'm explaining the message.
I'm telling you.
You want to say something else?
No, I was gonna say, but what were you referring to when he went before King?
Remember when Paul was before Festus, he said Festus gave him an option of whether do you want to be released or do you not?
And he was on trial.
And Paul said, no,
right.
I appeal to Caesar. And saying that, he is appealing to Caesar. He must go before Caesar, must go all the way to Rome, not a Greek. And therefore, he's going to that. And why does he explains later, so that I can go before all the different kings, all the different Caesars, all the different, and proclaim the good news of the...
No, he appealed to Caesar because they were about to put him to death. That's why he appealed to Caesar. That's why he went before Caesar. See, Esau think they know something. They don't know shit. You know, going to college, wasting your money. We read in the history that he was going there because he was being accused of the Jews. And when he was trying to talk to certain individuals about it that were in the power seat to let him go, they were trying to get him to go back to Jerusalem. And he wasn't having that because they already were bound to kill him. So that's why he appealed to Caesar, because he was a Roman citizen. So he used that opportunity to defend himself. That's what he was there for, to defend himself. And matter of fact, I believe there's one verse, I'm not sure which Acts it is. Let's see. Let me type in 12 tribes, see when that where that comes up. In Acts. Okay, Acts 26. Let's go there real quick. Acts 26. Acts 26 and okay, that was verse 7. You know what? I start at 1. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, Thou art permitted to speak for thyself. Then Paul stretched forth the hand and answered for himself. So remember, this is him in his defense, explaining why he was there. I think myself happy, King Agrippa, because I shall answer for myself this day before thee, touching all the things whereof I am accused of the Jews. So he's there in his defense, explaining why he's there. Especially because I know thee to be expert in all customs and questions which are among the Jews, wherefore I beseech thee to hear me patiently. It says, my manner of life from my youth, which was at the first among mine own nation at Jerusalem, know all the Jews, which knew me from the beginning. If they would testify that after the most straightest sect of our religion, I lived a Pharisee. And now I stand and am judged of the hope of the promise made of the Most High unto our fathers, unto which promise our 12 tribes instantly serving the Most High day and night hope to come. For which hope's sake, King Agrippa, I am accused of the Jews. So he's given his defense. He's not witnessing to these individuals for their salvation. He was using his situation and his status to be able to get away from that, because he still had work to do. Why should it be thought a thing incredible with you that the Most High should raise the dead? So he's explaining what's going down and what he was being accused of. And being that Agrippa was a king of the Jews, even though he was an Edomite, he knew the law. He knew the different things and customs of Israel, because he was a fake king over Israel. So he had to know the laws and all of that. You see? So Paul was in defense of himself. And this is why he appealed to Caesar, because they were trying to send him back to Jerusalem. And that's the reason why Paul appealed to Caesar. And that's the reason why he was giving his defense and explaining why he was there. He wasn't witnessing to them. There's a difference in witnessing to someone for their salvation and explaining to somebody in your defense. All right? So get it right, troop. You know, these devils don't know nothing.
Lord.
Right.
And so, what he's saying
Meaning Esau.
here is that Paul is taking on this. He did not have to appeal to Caesar. He was well within his right not to do so.
Right, and we just read, which he's right. He didn't have to appeal to Caesar, but why did he appeal to Caesar? Because Festus wanted to send him back to Jerusalem so that he can be examined by Festus back in Jerusalem, just to do the Jews a favor. You see? And what happened? Paul said, nah, the hell with that, because he already knew what was going on. He already knew what was going down, because his sister's son, I believe that was his sister's son, which would be his nephew, told him that they had a plot to kill him. So he went and he sent him to go tell the captain. The captain took 2 centurions, set up 200 men, 200 soldiers to take him, and they went, I believe that was to Caesarea. See? Because it was a process. You didn't just go up to Caesar. There was a process. Just like in this society, you have a process. You can't just go to the Supreme Court. You have to go to different courts and different lower courts and argue your situation, and then the last remedy, the last resort, then you go to the Supreme Court. So that's what it was back then. That was Caesar. So the only thing that he had was to appeal to Caesar. Because there's another scripture, I'm not sure if it's Acts 26 or 27, where after they finished examining Paul, they said, look, we find this man nothing worthy of death or something like that. If he hadn't appealed to Caesar, we would have let him go. You see? But he appealed to Caesar because he knew that his countrymen wanted to kill him. And that's why. Not because he wanted to go to, I gotta go to Nero's and I gotta get down there because I gotta witness to him. I gotta tell him about Yahushua, you know, how he died and shed his blood. For what? For the devil? Yahushua didn't shed his blood for no devil. He only shed his blood for the nation of Israel. And that's what these devils don't want to accept. You know? So I just wanted to do something a little something on that. You know, I pray that you brothers have been edified to the next time I say Shalom. Festus back in Jerusalem just to do the Jews a favor. You see? And what happened? Paul said, nah, the hell with that, because he already knew what was going on. He already knew what was going down because his sister's son, I believe that was his sister's son, which would be his nephew, told him that they had a plot to kill him. So he went and told